Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to AfriCAN Do, episode number 2. It's a pleasure to be back here, and today we have an extremely exciting guest, someone I'm very excited to have on our second episode. I think a very worthy African entrepreneur. Um, she goes by the name Navalayo Osembo, and Navalayo is many of you know ENDA Athletic or the ENDA shoe, which was Kenya's first home-based shoe targeted at athletes. And it's quite a story. I look forward to having you, Nava. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure to be here, finally.
Yeah, excellent. So this has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Apologies for taking time to get this second episode up and running, but better late than never. And so we'll get right into it. So,
Cool.
Nava, you're not trained in shoe manufacture
Not
or
at all. Not at all.
anything to do with athletics or wear or sportswear.
Yeah.
Yet you decided to set up a shoe manufacturing company. And I think
Yeah.
if I recall right, your background is in the NGO space, or you're in
Oh, no. I'm actually a lawyer.
You're a lawyer
I'm
by
a
training.
lawyer and an accountant.
Okay.
So found myself in footwear.
And then you decided to chonga viatu.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us a bit. Maybe let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
So how did you get into shoes? What made you decide to design a shoe? And you went at it, I dare say, the difficult way,
Yeah.
in the sense that
Very
you
difficult
went
way.
and you got into design, all very new spaces.
Yeah.
And you set out to make a shoe that was at par with the big global brands in the world. So
Yep.
maybe tell us your story and let's take it from there.
Yeah, so I'd say the interest in sports comes from different areas. So my dad was in the military, and this was just back in the days. I didn't realize how much it was impacting me. But sports and fitness is a key part of it. And so seeing soldiers run in the morning was something very,
You grew up with.
yes, I grew up with. And then the disciplined forces in Kenya are among the very few employers who actually hire you to be an athlete. So a lot of people, a lot of the athletes who were in now it's Kenya Defense Forces, we used to call it differently back then.
Yeah.
So those were people like grew up seeing. And then my dad also comes from this place in Western, but Eldoret is like our main town. So Eldoret is a place that I've seen being built by athletics money and prize money. And, we're kind of like proud of that. It was like the main big town. And last but not least, it was seeing this vicious cycle of an athlete makes it and then they become poor and then they die poor. And, it's like we have to do something. We can't always be consuming and not really planning in terms of being in the space. So the idea for ENDA just was more of, can we try to not be purely consumers? What can we do to get on the producer side so that we can add value for money and hopefully create a bigger economy for everyone? And, people don't necessarily have to rely so much on athletes, but to spread that industry to many others.
Interesting. So that upbringing of yours, or you being a daughter of a military man, and growing up in military, I'm assuming on bases and the like,
yes,
and seeing this whole athletics, I think that's a very interesting thing that you raise about Kenya policemen, prison warders.
Exactly. It's always police, prison, and defense forces that most of our runners are from there.
Yes. So so it's an idea, and you want to participate. I think it's fair to say you want to participate in the ecosystem.
Yes.
You've been lived in this ecosystem of sports, and it's not just running. There are agents, there are shoes, there are uniforms, there's kit, there's a lot. And in Kenya, we hear a lot of stories around that. Not all positive, but we all grew up with them.
Yeah.
So how does this then, you having been a lawyer and an accountant, how do you then transition to say, yes, first of all, how shoes? How did you end up saying that I'm going to make a shoe and I'm not going to design a tracksuit and so on? What did you decide? How did you land on shoes?
So there were two key thoughts. One was that if you're getting into the production space, where is more value created? What was the place where we couldn't really argue what Kenya was, And apparel, I felt like, now this coming from a business perspective, it just felt like apparel is an easy entry, and therefore we would have more competition. But
Yep.
footwear is kind of like harder. So we're
Barriers
like,
to entry.
exactly. So I was like, if we give ourselves time to grow as a brand, footwear is much harder. Let's go there. At least it'll give us time before we get like proper competitors. So it was purely economic. And then from one of the things I think I had a privilege of when I was younger was I started my career off at Deloitte, and I was in the risk department. So
Yeah.
mapping processes was something we did for every single client. You kind of have to understand what's this process and draw it and map it. And so I think that kind of thinking made me think that footwear is not hard, because you map the process and they're like, okay, you kind of design, you source, you test, so from a logical perspective, it made sense. It wasn't so scary. And I was like, okay, we could do it. So I think
Yeah.
those two combined gave me that energy of this is possible. Let's do
Okay.
it. Yeah.
So now you've conceptualized the shoe. You have
Yes.
decided it's shoes that you're going to go into.
Mhm.
So where do you start from? What did you do?
Yeah. So the first thing is we went to the source, which is the athletes. What's the best running shoe? What are the characteristics of a good running shoe? So we did like a survey, and they were like, we want a shoe that, is you feel like you're not wearing a shoe when you're wearing it. So of course you translate that it has to be light, kind of has stability when you're kind of like running with it, not too high, not too, so getting that, and also just the knowledge that there isn't a perfect running shoe. There are different running shoes for different running styles and types. And so that, again, we were thinking of making one shoe, but from that we discovered, okay, we have to think of the breadth of running and how to create that. And then the next stop was, who's going to design this shoe? So go to LinkedIn and email all the designers that you
shoe
can find.
designers.
There
So look for
are.
shoe designers. Yeah.
There are, and they were really nice. I think a lot of people, where we ended up was through references. Someone says, okay, I don't know, but you can talk to this and this person, or maybe I'm freelancing, I don't have the capacity, but I can talk to this person. So that's how we found a shoe designer.
Wow.
And then the good thing was that the designer had already linkages in China in terms of how to produce a prototype and everything. And pretty much that's how we ended up
Have
with
you
our
left
first shoe.
Deloitte by this time?
Oh, yeah. I
You've
left Deloitte a long time ago.
Yeah.
Deloitte was more of I left it probably 2 years after campus, because I started interning there in my second year.
So
I
by
stayed.
the time you're now looking for shoe designers of LinkedIn, have you left your employer, whoever your employer was at the time?
No. So
you're
it was, I
doing
was
kind
in
of desktop.
between. I
Yeah.
was in between because I had just come from doing my master's, and actually didn't even start as a running shoe company. It started as a tennis academy.
Okay.
So because when I was in London, I got to see Wimbledon. And one of the things that really blew me away was the prize money. And I'm
Wow.
like, why are we hustling for
for
100,000?
and there's 2 million,
And
2 million
I think back then it was like almost 860,000 pounds,
yeah.
And I was like, why are we fishing in the pond when there's a whole ocean?
Yeah.
So I came back with the idea of starting a tennis academy, which I
Okay.
did in Bungoma.
Yes.
And of course, now I realize the challenges of what it takes to create a tennis academy. We ran it for 2 years, it didn't work out. And so I went to this accelerator, and the idea was, how do you help me fix this business to make it work? And they were like, okay, let's put tennis aside. What other sport? And running came, and ENDA kind of came into that progression.
Okay.
So by this particular time, I'd just come back from London. I was home looking for jobs. And so ENDA kind of started when I had just found a position at the UN. And it was, all this was kind of like research in between, but I didn't think it would become as big as it was.
Did you take the UN position?
Yeah, I did, because back then ENDA was just an idea. Like I had just literally come out of the accelerator program. I had just met my co-founder. We were literally, I met him for the first time to discuss the business, and then I was leaving like 5 days later.
Okay.
So we weren't sure what it was going to be, but we just kept on discussing, but I was still doing my regular employment.
Okay,
Yes.
excellent. So now you've found your shoe designer.
Yeah.
You found your shoe designer. You've carried out your survey with the local athletes who you know from your network. They've given you feedback. Now what?
Now is to go into mass production, right? And then now is when you come now to realize the supply chain and minimum order quantities. You just can't go and order 50 shoes.
Yeah.
You have to order a big bulk. But it's also not just about demand. It's supply. It's also about demand. Who's going to buy the shoes? And then most importantly, where are you going to get the capital to make the shoes.
So had you
Because
prototyped a shoe by this
we had
time?
a prototype. We had, I
So
think, 3 pairs.
a made prototype or just a drone
No,
sketched out?
a
made
made.
prone.
We had a made. I think
So
we
you
had
went
3
through that whole
pairs.
journey of
Yes,
sketching it out, you see, and
exactly.
then pieces, and
Exactly.
it's okay.
Yes, and even who's going to make it.
Yeah.
So we did that, and sometimes I'm like, am I ready for this? When I look back, it's always like, yeah. So when we initially started, actually, we were 3 co-founders.
Yeah.
And then we had a slight misunderstanding. Okay, we had quite a misunderstanding in terms of the future of the company. So this happened when we had just created that prototype. And at that particular point, we decided to break away, like the third co-founder left. And
Mhm.
so we had to buy the assets and pay them for their work, basically, which was a lot of money.
Mm.
And so getting that, and then now we are left with a prototype, but with no supply chain. Right. So because he had the knowledge, and so he walked away, and we kind of had
So
to
you haven't made a single shoe,
no.
and you're already buying off things to make shoes
Exactly. That don't exist.
that don't exist.
That don't exist.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we went through that, thankfully. But, again, I had just been from a student. We didn't have money. And, my co-founder, he's American Brit. But there's also, I don't know, in Kenya, we have this, a lot of people always say, like, foreign founders get more money and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it really depends on the it depends on the context and the industry, because we
Yes.
didn't see that. We literally scraped by and saved and had to use our savings and stuff like that to get by. And eventually, we got to the point where we realized, okay, we talked to like almost every bank, every financial institution you can think of. We
Mhm.
talked to them, and whatever it is they were asking for, we didn't have. And so we had to think of a creative way to launch the product. We decided to launch it through crowdfunding,
Okay.
which, yeah, everybody was like, yeah, you might look too cheap, but in retrospect, was the best decision ever,
Mhm.
because it allowed us as a company to be an export-oriented company from the word go, which
Yeah.
we didn't realize back then. But I think that's what saved us behind like so many instances where that revenue was critical to helping us move to the next stage.
So you crowdfund. So
Yes.
you went into a crowdfunding site.
Yes.
And you say, we are ENDA Athletic.
Yeah.
We want to start making shoes. We have
Yes.
prototyped a shoe.
Exactly.
And we're trying to raise what?
We are trying to raise, back then we were trying to raise, I can't remember, I used to have these figures at the top of my hand. We were trying to raise, I think, $100,000 or something.
$100,000
Yeah.
to make what?
To make the first batch of shoes.
And the batch was how big?
I can't remember. I think we had agreed on like 2,000 pairs with
2,000
the
pairs of
supplier or
shoes.
something like
Yeah.
that. And then also crowdfunding, I think, also just to clarify, people always imagine it's just to go on the platform and put on your idea. Like I would say it's a 6-month process, because it's almost like a harambe. You have to go and find the people who are going to back you. By the time you launch, you know exactly, at least you have a 60 to 70% knowledge of who's going to back
give you
up.
money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we did that. We raised the money. I remember we hit our target pretty well. We think we hit our target in a week, which was like
Oh,
really
wow.
good. Yeah, it was really good proof of concept that the world was like, yeah, Kenyan running shoes made sense. And then after that, we were super excited on a really big high. Then we went to the supplier and they were like, yeah, we changed our minimum order quantity. You need
From
like
2,000.
6,000.
We have trebled it.
We have.
Yeah.
And there we have people's money
Yeah.
with expectations of shoes in a certain amount of time. And we didn't have a supplier again. And we had to start looking for a supplier real quick. So in summary, what was supposed to be a 6-month process became almost a 2-year process to get the shoes. And yeah.
Allow me to take you a step back,
Mhm.
because, okay, we'll come back to that 6,000 or increase in minimum order quantities.
Yeah.
But why you're making a Kenyan running shoe?
Yes.
What stopped you from making your Kenyan running shoe in Kenya?
We don't have the infrastructure and the capacity to.
So tell us a bit of what we don't have.
First, we don't have the machinery. Like, okay, let's start with the raw materials.
Yeah.
Like when you're making footwear, the midsole component is made from something called EVA.
Mhm.
ethyl vinyl acetate, something like that. So it's
Yes.
the compound matters and how you mix it up to get it matters. So we don't
That
have
spongy like thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
to get that consistency. We didn't have we just didn't have the supply chain for that. And also, it's not just about having the thing, it's the mixing and the chemicals to go into it and the ratios and stuff like that. We didn't have that. That's like the core part of the shoe. We do have a very good apparel industry, but not necessarily for shoe uppers, mostly for clothes
Okay.
and things like that. And then also, it's about quality and how the workers put the pieces together. A shoe actually has very many components. It's not just an upper and a bottom. It's the eyelets, it's the laces, it's the TPU overlay, it's just like so many things.
Yeah.
And you need little micro ecosystems that are each creating this thing, and then you bring it together. And then now once you have the upper and the bottom, then how you also like, what's the word? You basically put the upper on the foot, on the midsole. So we have that, like the assembly, but we didn't have the major components in terms of what is required. And then again, from an economics perspective, you're doing 2,000 pairs. That is it's an intensive amount of capital that you need for those machinery. It just didn't make sense to do it. Just go where it was being done.
So it was not for a lack of trying. You explored locally.
Yeah, we explored. I think I went to every shoe factory that exists, like formally and informally.
Yeah.
It's not. But the idea we had was to eventually bring it to Kenya.
Yes.
Like learn from China and
Yes.
Vietnam and other countries and bring it here.
And do a knowledge transfer kind of thing.
Exactly.
But I find it very interesting that you now speak. I don't know if you recognize this yourself, but you speak like a shoe. You are a shoe expert, not like you speak. You're a shoe expert, and as I listen to you, I hear that. But you are not. You know when you started. So how did you then bridge that gap? Is it in the process of design that you start being asked questions as you're interacting with the shoe designer?
Yeah.
And then you start learning the different terminologies and all that. And how long did that take you to now feel that when you're talking to a manufacturer, you're speaking with confidence and you feel like you're asking the right questions and getting the right answers?
I'd say it's a work in progress, because even now where I am, I'm learning more about footwear, right? But I think it's just, first we got books about shoes, and then we also like the nice ones about Phil Knight, and then now you go to the technical ones of what does it mean to make a shoe. These are the different parts of a shoe. And then we had a designer who was very knowledgeable, and they were patient with us in terms of, okay, this is the process and this is what you need and stuff like that. And then, of course, the good old school way of making mistakes. You make mistakes and then you discover, okay, it was because of X, Y, Z,
Then you come
and
back.
then now you come back, and now, for example, if it's the springiness, that was the issue. Maybe someone was saying it feels a little bit hard. Then now you go to the manufacturer and they tell you, yeah, it's called the durometer. You're like, okay, now I know it's called. So it's just by trial and error. And I'm still a huge believer of, you don't need to be an expert, unless you're a doctor and you're cutting up someone. I'm like, the rest of life, I feel, can be apprenticed.
I agree with you in that I think you could do anything you put your mind to.
Yeah, but you need the knowledge.
Yes, I think what you need to do is be open to learn.
Yes, you have to be open to learn.
You have to be open to learn. And one of the interesting things that I tell a lot of existing and emerging entrepreneurs is that there's no knowledge you can't buy.
No, there isn't.
Particularly in this world as it's evolving today, you can find someone to teach you anything you want to learn in any sector.
Exactly.
We were discussing nuclear power plants the other day, and I was like, if you want to build a nuclear power plant in Kenya, you can.
Yeah, you can.
You'll just buy the knowledge.
True.
And you'll have to recognize, but the recognition that the knowledge is important is a mindset that we require.
Exactly. Yeah. You always need to be learning, but I just feel like if you're curious by nature, you don't even realize you're learning. It's always about asking questions. And I'm a huge, huge, huge believer that it's something we need to keep it's something we need to encourage more, especially in the Kenyan context and the Kenyan culture. We always have this thing of don't speak too loud,
Yep.
or don't embarrass us in front of other people
Ask.
and stuff
There are
like
no
that.
stupid questions.
Exactly. Just
Yeah.
keep asking, and that's how you get to know what you don't know.
Higher. You have $100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You have gone back to your guy,
Yeah.
and he's told you, me, I've upped my minimum quantities
Yep.
from 2,000 shoes to 6,000 shoes.
Yep.
So where do we go from there?
We had to literally find, and remember, we'd lost our designer who was like the third co-founder.
Yes.
So we had to now find another designer, and we had to find another factory. So that process took a while, because then you also have to make the prototype with this other.
Again, because you had
Exactly.
made it with the other guy.
Exactly. You have
Yes.
to do it again. And remember, you have money, people's money from the crowdfunding campaign. So that was a really good lesson in customer service, because you hear all the crap that people have to say about you.
You're a con one.
I know.
You know, where are my
And you have to be
shoes?
like, wait. So I learned a lot in terms of communication management,
Yeah.
and just being open and transparent, in the sense of, guys, here's where we are. Like, here's where we are. And I feel like, again, that process was very difficult in the moment. But when I look back, I'm like, it really taught us as a brand transparency. And I feel like that was one of the key things that really
Yeah.
helped us grow, where you just say, here's where we are. We are doing our best, but this is where we are.
Yeah.
And we'll do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did that. And eventually we found a designer, we found a factory, we were able to make it. But as I said, we delivered product 2 years later, which is a big fail in the industry standards.
Yeah.
But I think it was also super critical in really helping us find that core fan base that was like, we totally believe in you and you can do this. And I honestly feel like those are the people who propelled us to go on forward, even on those moments where you feel like you want to give up.
So you've now found your new manufacturer
Yeah.
of shoes. He has accepted the 2,000.
Yeah.
You action.
Mhm.
And where do your shoes come to? They're shipped to Kenya, or?
Yeah, they were shipped to Kenya, because again, now this is also learning the hard way, the business of logistics and taxes, because we were very silly enough to not factor in taxes in the cost of
the shoe.
delivery.
So you
No,
say
because
the
then now-
manufacturer is giving me at this much, I'll bring shoe, I'll sell.
It's true. And
Yeah.
then now you start realizing, especially, I think we had customers from like 32 countries. So those were 32 different jurisdictions. And some of them you could send direct, others you had to pay the tax. And the tax was sometimes even more than the value of the shoe. And
Wow.
then now already this customer is angry for the delay. And now you're like, sorry, now you have to pay a little bit more to get your shoe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a very humbling learning moment, but also just a true appreciation of logistics and what it takes to deliver a product from one point to the other, and why it's such a huge cost component when you're talking about moving product. Yeah.
As you're talking about logistics, it's interesting for me, because I like when you're looking at businesses to dig into those little things that people don't think are things, you know. But they're actually very big, and you've
They
touched
are.
two of the biggest.
Yeah.
I mean, because tax and logistics
Yep.
in almost any industry are
Yeah.
going to come and bite you.
Yeah.
if
We
you
lost
don't-
money, in fact. I feel like
those first 2,000 shoes. you
Yeah,
lost
we
money.
didn't make any money. In fact, we had to dig more into our capital, because the key thing for us was to just deliver the shoes, right?
Yes.
Just to deliver. And yeah, it was significantly more expensive than we had thought. And it actually took us negative. But at least we proved concept. But it was just that one thing I was like, you really never underestimate logistics. Yeah.
So now you've now become a shoemaker.
Yeah.
Because now you could say you're a shoemaker. You've made your 2,000 shoes.
Yeah.
Have you sold all of them? Or you've sold
Yeah, because it was pre-orders. So this was the
Pre-orders,
beauty
okay.
of crowdfunding.
Yes.
That there was a customer for each shoe, and we had a few. But then also we had a few challenges of sizing. Yeah, our sizing was it was running a bit small.
Okay.
Yeah.
So slightly smaller than it should have been.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was again more frustration, because first we didn't have the product to do refunds and exchanges. We didn't have the money to do refunds. We didn't have the product to do exchanges. And it was too expensive for either the customer to send back to the shoes to us, for us to call the shoe. So I think we just had a bunch of shoes people had floating, and it was just more like, okay, you can give your friend.
You can give your friend who has a slightly smaller foot than you do.
I know. I look back and I'm like, my God,
But priceless lessons, would you say?
Extremely, extremely. I feel like that's basically how I learned what I know. Like we just made mistakes and mistakes and mistakes, but there was no guidebook, there was no rule book, and I'm like, isn't that life? Yeah, that's life. And I feel like I try to keep that same spirit of it's okay. Like we are discovering, it's okay. You lost that money, it's fine. You made that mistake, it's fine. We are discovering. I feel like if you take that approach, you're more gentle on yourself.
Yeah, but also I think you have touched on something that I think is quite interesting and important.
Yeah.
If the goal is to make a good shoe,
yes,
and not profitability immediately, then you're right. You are a lot more gentle on yourself because you're able to take those lessons. Yes, I'm not belittling the impact of losing money.
Now my other lesson is that profitability first.
Okay.
Because a business must be sustainable.
Yes.
We have very lofty goals and dreams, but economics is always hard facts. And hard facts means you're either making money
or not. Yeah.
And so all your dreams and aspirations have to be based on making money. I think I used to be on the other side, but there's a guy who I remember he sponsored, I got a scholarship to LSE back in the day. And there's this guy who's like, how do you have enough money to sponsor all these kids to come to London and do all these things? And one of the days he was talking to us and he said, make money, then help others. And I was always like, no, that's not how it should be. But going through this process, I'm like,
became a convert.
I'm like, I get what he means. You need to be able to sustain your giving.
True.
Otherwise, you're spoiling it from the first. You're just kind of like telling someone, okay, here's enough to make you not hungry today, but, let's not talk about the future. And now I'm like, okay, you know what? A business must make money, and that must be the primary objective. Otherwise, I think in our case, we spent a lot of money doing development work that should have been ideally ecosystem done by the government or done by something.
Policy work.
Exactly.
Lobbying.
Oh, yeah. We were getting guys from China to come to the factory to train the workers. None of the other companies were doing that.
Yeah.
I was busy trying to see the
at your expense. Sorry.
Yeah,
you're getting the guys from China.
Who was going to do it? Because we had the dream of building in Kenya.
Yes.
And so how do you build if you don't have a roadmap? And this guy's already doing it. I'm like, okay, nice factory guys, would you want to come in and treat? So we were training the workers ourselves and paying for that. We were getting the designers also to come and, mentor some of the talent. We were trying to go to the EPZ to lobby that, you don't need to have a factory in the EPZ to be an EPZ, because that actually has huge implications for small businesses here. So you are doing all that, and your key responsibility is to make the business flourish, And so we were doing a lot of other expenses, which I'm like, if we went back, we would probably have built a different business if we weren't so busy trying to fix the systemic issues around the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe now is a good time to segue into those systemic issues, because now, before you proceed to make more shoes, you must have encountered, you've touched on a few of them, but you must have encountered quite a few systemic issues that if you were to be a government advisor on industrialization, I'm sure you'd have some really good and hard-hitting facts and figures to share and say, listen, if we did this better, or if this existed and that existed, then we could be on our way to doing. Maybe you can walk us through a few of those things, what they are.
I had a trip to China, courtesy of the Africa Business Heroes. Shout out to them. Very good community. And I saw, at least from my experience, I'm like, they're building for their people. Like you see that It's more of what do I need to do XYZ, and they build it for their people. We build for others, or we build for the higher people of society, which I'm always like,
It's a
doesn't make
very
sense.
extractive.
It is extractive, and it's also nonsensical in the sense of you kind of also have to realize how economics works. It's not about a cake that ends, it's about a cake that grows. Like the more you grow the local base, the more there's opportunity even for you. I don't want to use negative examples, but I'm just like, you kind of have to switch that mindset. But my point is, number one, if we come back to the context of Kenya, who are your people? What's their GDP? What is the money in their pocket? Okay, fine. Let's start there. And how many small businesses can even afford to be in a factory to manufacture, right? So first things first is create the local incentive that makes the factory guy basically say, oh, I can actually let a local entrepreneur come into my factory and be able to manufacture. We were only able to manufacture here because Umoja, which the shoe company, basically gave us a chance to go into their factory. But I was like, how many other entrepreneurs have big dreams? It's just like this setup. You don't need to have a studio. You just need to be, exactly, you need to have the same mentality. And this is what I was basically trying to tell them, that I don't need to be, like how you have Uber and you have Airbnb. And I'm like, I don't need to have an asset to be recognized for who I am. And that means, so for example, when I'm importing, I get to pay the taxes upfront. I'm being charged duty, I'm being charged everything, and I pay it upfront. I don't have the money, remember, okay? So I pay it, and then at export, the theory is that you should be able to export it and get back your money, right? But whoever gets back the
who gets the refund?
money? And so
or when does it come?
you're like cash rich in your books, but you got no money, because it's all seated somewhere. And I'm like, guys, this actually, it is, what do you say it? It's like disadvantaging local businesses, because the other guys don't go through that. Like guys who have the capital already, remember, they have the capital, and we are basically saying foreign direct investment, which is what we are thinking of. We, again, going back to my point, we think of very lofty instead of going to the base. So foreign direct investment, come, we'll give you the work permits, we'll give you this, we'll give you that tax holiday, blah, blah, blah. Local person, you have to have the capital to have the presence to be there. And keep in mind, you're keeping my capital, right? And you're not giving me access to capital. And then you have to now grow and get into that designation. And then, so I just feel like it's another case where the wealthy have like 100% head start, and the poor, who are your people, which is what was mind-numbing for me, are like way behind. And we are talking about, SMEs are like the backbone of the economy. And I'm like, are they really?
Anyway, you have built this business.
Yep.
Now you've made shoes back and forth. I'm sure after that you had several other orders and lots of learnings therein. And maybe just to contextualize for the viewers, this start was around when?
2015.
So you're at 2015. Now maybe take us
2017.
2 years it took you to get product. You thought 6 months, it took you 2 years. But you now have product you're selling. You go through cycles where you get more capital and you order more shoes and you have understood tax and so on. But fast forward now to closer, maybe 8 years in. One of the things that I say about the entrepreneurial journey that is not discussed is the weight of the emotional toll of, you speak quite eloquently about all this stuff and how you're going through and the tax and the VAT delays. But I used to tell friends that I used to get cold sweats when PYE was due, because I know I don't have it.
Exactly.
And so on. So you're now 8 years in, you're feeling a bit tired. What conversations are you having?
First things first, I think entrepreneurship is about the quality of people, right? Quality of people. I think I was extremely lucky in having a quality co-founder. We had our differences in terms, we're humans. We had differences in terms of sometimes how we run the business and stuff like that. But the fact that he was someone and is still someone who says what he means and means what he says, I feel like that was instrumental in getting me towards the end, of the journey. I think we didn't have like a very strong HR. now I actually value HR at the same
Wow.
level as I value finance, because
Yes.
usually you're like, oh, what's the books, what's the money and stuff like that.
True.
HR is the gateway
The
of
people,
culture.
very true.
HR
And
is the
culture.
gateway. Yeah. And it's, you know how it says it's just one bad apple and spoils everything.
Agreed.
What it takes to build culture is so, so difficult.
Mm.
Like, you can be the head of an organization and you're like, I hate this organization. How did I become the head of it? What
Very
happened?
true. Yeah.
It can happen. And so, you know, I have a high respect for HR, and just looking at it as the gateway of the culture keepers. Like, who are you letting into your house, and who, you know, how are they a fit and stuff like that. And also for someone like me who had really had time having difficult conversations, the lesson of it's just easy to nip it in the bud, you
Yeah.
know, like nip it in the bud. Like, I don't think I had issues with difficult decisions, but I don't have them now, because the emotional toll of bad decisions is not worth it.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it. Like, if I see it and I can see far and I disagree with it, I feel like that whole
Let me walk
journey
away now.
taught me to just say, I'm good.
I'm
I don't
okay.
have to go
Well,
down the
even
road.
if it means walking away from the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just walk away.
Yeah.
Peace, I think peace is, you know, we have peace of mind. There are things which don't have value, but because they don't have value, we think that, I don't know how to say this, like, their price is so high that you can assume they have no value.
We underestimate their worth.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
underestimate the worth. And
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, that peace of mind, and also just being in tune with my inner vision. What did I want to achieve? And am I heading there? And if I'm not heading there, just having the grace to walk away and say, you know, it's been good. It's been good.
So you many might not know this,
Yeah.
because it was not highly publicized.
No.
But you have evolved from being founder and majority shareholder, or and you're now a minority shareholder.
Yeah.
And the business has changed hands
Yes.
successfully, which is something that I always admire.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurs are like baby. The
Yeah.
business is like a baby. So to reach a stage, and I have a peep behind the curtain on how a journey it was, even for you mentally, to just reach to the stage where you say, okay,
Yeah.
I can now take a break for myself, give someone else to run
Yeah.
this other leg of the business.
Mhm.
And ENDA is thriving. We saw
Yeah.
them kitting Olympic athletes.
I know.
I think for
was very
3 or
happy for them.
4.
It was a big dream that I had. I
Yeah.
never realized it, but that's also the importance of handing the baton to
Yeah.
somebody.
So you did that. You
Yep.
did that,
Mhm.
and you're enjoying, I guess, the peace of mind of being an employee again.
Is there
But
peace of mind? I'm like, I
don't think you're
you're
done. For me, I
Uh,
think I really am keen to see
uh-huh.
how your journey will evolve if I was to peer into the next decade. Because
Yeah.
I think you have some unbelievable lessons that you have collected along the way. And
Yeah, the lessons are many. I'm still processing them. I
yeah,
actually am. Because even when I was coming for this, I was like, am I ready to talk about this?
yeah,
But
yeah,
then, you know, I always believe life is never for the ready, because you never really get to a point. So, yeah, I still honestly believe, like, I feel like ENDA was such an emotional roller coaster that I still don't know what to do with it. Like, there are moments when you're okay, and there are moments you're like, okay. And there are moments where, you know, and there are also some people along the journey that we don't speak anymore, you
Yeah.
know, and so
yeah,
those are some of the things. And I think the thing, looking as an observer, looking in, is also now I see a lot of proliferation of entrepreneurship lessons and stuff like that. And half of them I'm like, yeah, but you could Google that. Like, you're not telling people the truth,
anything.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a huge caveat that entrepreneurship is not a romantic idea. Like,
There's some pain there.
yeah, there is
Yeah.
some significant pain, but it always has to come to what do you want to achieve. But at the same time, as much as there's pain, there's also significant opportunities that come from that. If you had told me I was gonna be in footwear, I would never have believed you. But it was just following and following, and now I feel like, okay, this is my at least for now, this is my industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are in that industry now.
Yes.
You are, I think, heading an Africa division of a food. Is that right? Is that?
Yes, I'm the director of Africa for On.
Okay.
the Swiss running shoe company.
Excellent.
Yeah, good transition. They're good guys. I knew them from a long time ago. They were a North Star for ENDA way before I even met their team. But it was just, like they won like the ISPO award, and I'm like, we're gonna win the ISPO award as well,
Yeah.
and we won that. So I feel like on is I really liked that they could come in and like change an industry where everybody kept on. It was almost like laughable when everyone was like, "Oh, you wanna compete with Nike? Ha ha ha, cute." But and I'm like, yeah, On has been the dream that has made that possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm thinking like now to be able to work with them as well and make that happen in Africa. Yeah, it's gonna be good times.
You've touched on 3 or 4 topics that
Mm-hmm.
I think are extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm just going to repeat them for the purpose of emphasis,
Okay.
because I think they are priceless. And as we continue in this African journey
Yeah.
of building African entity,
Mm-hmm.
and the first I think is the biggest.
Yeah.
It's, can we start building for our own?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I keep on saying that Africa is for Africans, and Africans should consume the Africa that they want, and they should be given the freedom to design that Africa the way they want it to be. So I struggle with sometimes funders when I tell them, listen, have you asked the people? Are you just coming with a solution that you
Yeah.
think is a problem that they have?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we have solutions that are for Africans by Africans?
That's a very wide thing because
It's
I'm
a big
like,
one, like I said, and that's why I touched on it.
I know because the same way some people feel like I sold out on ENDA and
Yeah.
not, because they're like, you should have kept it African. It's still African, but it's also, you need to realize the role of systemic versus individual ability.
True.
And I feel like we cannot speak there again, it feels like lofty when we're like, let's go back to the basics. And from a basic perspective, can the people do that, right? Can you kind of like try and do that? So I feel I'm a bit skeptical now of what exactly is African by Africans for African. I'm a bit more of, I think we cannot do it without collaboration with the key actors.
Yeah.
But there's also that internal assessment and say, it sounds nice to say we can do it, but we are not creating the opportunities and the environments that make it possible. We just aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, is that, I struggle with the practicality, basically.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The other big thing that
Mhm.
stands out for me
Yeah.
is just, and I think it's something that we really belittle,
Mm-hmm.
the depth of your knowledge and the knowledge that you've got. And that's why I say, I
Yeah.
don't think, if I was a betting man, I
Uh-huh.
would say that this is a stepping stone in your journey. Yeah. Because I think you have such depth of knowledge of a sector that you're now an active player in.
Yeah.
And that knowledge we
Mhm.
belittle. We tend to take it for granted. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you now have it. And I
I'm
think
not
you
sure.
know
Maybe
how
it's
to.
Kenyan humility, or what do you call it? You're
Yeah.
like, okay, I know, but not that. I'm trying
Sitaki
to also get
kusema,
over
you know.
that. I'm
No,
also
I
trying
think
to
you do.
get
And I think
over
that the
that.
job that you have transitioned to speaks to what you do know
Yeah.
and what knowledge you have.
Yeah.
But the
Mhm.
other interesting thing that you mentioned that I just want to emphasize is, man, someone said to me once, a saying that I've come to really like. He says, culture will trump strategy any day.
Yeah. Eat it for
You know,
breakfast or
I
lunch.
love it. I love it because
Uh,
we underestimate culture.
hey, we
And a
do.
lot of people say, oh, yeah, once you get the funding, you'll be fine. But
No.
culture is
No.
everything.
Yeah. In fact, one thing I learned is you always think you need the money, and you don't always need the money. This is one thing I've taken away from, because somehow in your entrepreneurial journey, you imagine that if you had this, you would be so successful.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like a sieve, or it's like a thing. Like if you pour water with something that has holes, it kind of pours through. So it's the same thing with money. If you have something that has systems and structures like that, it'll kind of be contained. So even before entrepreneurs think of money, they have to think of their internal systems. It has to make sense. It has to work. And it has to be able to withhold, which goes back to the cultural, the cultural thing. Like what's the people caring enough for the company, or are they just like, I'm just here to get my paycheck and go? Are they bought into the vision,
Yeah.
Are they like I don't know, but I just feel like there's a passion, and now I see it at On, which I was trying to put a word to it, and I'm like, this is what I was missing. When it's almost like you have an army of ants moving in one direction,
Yeah.
and you don't have to be the be it all, know it all. Like, you
True.
can count on your teammates. I feel like that actually makes the entrepreneurial journey better. But here locally, I think we still have a lot of problems, and I don't know if it's the education system. There's just something about us where we are like, what should I do next? What should I do next? Like, we don't think the whole 9 yards and say, okay, let's think about this and stuff like that. So
And I guess that's why we're doing things like this or having this conversation so that you can
yeah.
trigger thoughts.
Yes.
The last point I think, just as we wind down,
Mm-hmm.
is the relationship between
Mm-hmm.
local context
Yeah.
and capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, you always come back to capital, because
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel that sometimes the price that you pay,
Yeah.
yes, of course, knowing what to do with the money when you get it is equally important.
Mm-hmm.
But we just need to find a way to address access to capital.
We do. I've
Yeah.
been thinking about this issue for a long time, because there's always an issue of, well, the foreigners are coming in and they're not funding locals and stuff like that. But my conclusion is, if we can lose the amount of money we lose to corruption, we can lose that amount of money to entrepreneurship.
Yep.
It's our risk appetite. So for me, I genuinely believe Kenya has money. You can't,
Yep.
like, my personal belief, but I'm like, it's there. It's just not circulating where it needs to circulate.
Mhm.
And so when we think about this, and again, going back to asking questions, is why do we allow ourselves to hemorrhage money in one sector, but not allow ourselves to hemorrhage money in another sector? Because we'll say, oh, entrepreneurs are too risky. They're going to lose all the money, or they're going to squander all the money. Let them. Let's see what it does when actually
True.
money is in circulation.
True.
So I think my own take from this first is, of course, for ENDA, we were able to raise money from a variety of people, including Africans and non-Africans. But it always comes to me that there has to be someone who's willing to put skin in the game. And we, again, from I don't want to say policy perspective, but I feel like that's where it stems in, because again, we're not creating for the masses, we're creating we have all these lofty MOUs and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to everybody saying entrepreneurs are risky, I'm like, no, you've just decided that we have more risk appetite to lose money to corruption as opposed to lose
Fair
money to
enough.
entrepreneurs.
That's a very nice
We have the
analogy.
money.
Yeah.
We just need to love ourselves enough to give money to the people that need it. I genuinely feel, and maybe this is more from a biblical perspective, but I just feel like we lack love. We
For
really do.
ourselves.
We really do.
Yeah.
Because when you see how the other day I was in Kariako. I've kind of like been going to different places in Kenya. And I'm like, Kenya has extreme wealth and extreme poverty. And I don't understand how, but I've also seen that there's a huge separation in these worlds, huge. So you can exist in this world and never be in the other world.
Never
And
see
so
it.
you never see it, never experience it, and just like, why are they complaining? It's just the price of bread, or why are they complaining? And so we need, or rather the higher classes need to remember that the lower classes are human beings. They are people, they have families, they have loved ones. It's not just a random death, it's not just a random statistics. We need to recognize that. Going back to my point of, we grow as a country when the base is strong. This is
Very
economics,
true.
whether you're looking at export, imports, GDP, GNI, all of that. So I just feel like we have this scarcity mentality, but we also lack love. We lack love for ourselves. And therefore, we're okay with doing shagala bagala things because it's just for the Kenyans,
Yeah.
But if it's just for like a visitor, maybe it's a visitor mentality with the
So
nice
African
dishes.
excellence. We need a dose of African excellence
For
for ourselves. Yeah.
For ourselves, not for
Question.
external audiences. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there's a disconnect between African capital
Yes.
and African intellect?
Yes. Because African capital is not necessarily in the hands of African intellect.
Exactly.
Look at how much money we have. No museums, no cultural investments. No, we're just building tall. I'm just always looking around. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you
No,
see the
we're
lack of
fencing off the
thinking.
parks.
You see, and even in the buildings, we're not putting our culture, our
Yeah,
creativity, even
yeah,
at the, I don't want to point, some places when you go that represent Kenya, it's just concrete, or it's just, and yet if you go to a place like Kuona, you are like, there's so much art.
yeah,
There's like, we have so much, but we don't use it. But I think it's because we don't engage with it.
yeah.
And so it comes back down to, I just feel like we have such individualism that it is making us miss the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that a country that succeeds at the base, which is also just the law of gravity, the stronger the base, the stronger the thing. But you cannot do that if from the beginning you're not thinking about your people. You're not thinking about that. I don't know how we solve it. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
a leadership thing. I don't know if it's a thing. But I think for me, it's just I feel we have what we need. We just don't allocate it. And we kind of have to be the ones that fix it. Nobody's going to fix it for us.
So,
Mhm.
Navalayo Osembo, this has
Yes.
been an amazing conversation for me. I've really enjoyed it. I really do wish you all the very best
Thank
as
you
your
very
journey
much.
continues.
Yep.
Maybe as a parting shot, if there's anything that you feel you'd like to share with our audience, um, or if there's any tidbits you want, maybe people will be curious about your next steps. What is going through your mind? What are you
Yeah.
thinking of doing?
Yep.
Maybe you could just tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think now my current focus is just on sports in Africa and in Kenya. But again, going down to the level of who are we serving in sports, and basically getting allies in that. And that's something I'm really hoping to be able to do, that we have to remember we are serving athletes. And we have to remember these athletes are coming from extremely dire circumstances in most of the cases, right? And so how are we being stewards of the assets that we've been given? How are we being fair to them? How are we making sure that the system actually serves them? How are we getting them to the global light? How do we make sure that we are not just, like, how do we just basically take care of them? So that's something I'm really keen on, in addition to also just really exploring how commerce can make sense for Africa from a sporting perspective. I think we right now we are very much in the sporting goods. So a lot of people think sports and sales, but I think there's deeper underlying thing that we can do with culture, that we can do with arts and stuff like that. And how is that merger? Because I just feel like Africa hasn't yet emerged. We have little pockets, but we have to create an ecosystem that actually brings up, I don't know how to say it, but I just feel like our global culture and sports have to come together. And I feel like Africa is the place where it comes together. It's the last frontier. Like, you
Excellent.
have to do it.
No, I'm very confident and inspired by what you've said and what you're doing, and I think I dare say that the future of African sports and African athletes is in good hands because you've dared to dream and you are actively participating in understanding the ecosystem first and
Yeah.
then being an active participant in that ecosystem. So,
Yeah.
congratulations for what you've done so
Thank you
far
very much.
and all the very, very best in the future.
That sounds good. Thank
Yeah,
you. And yeah, all the best to you
excellent.
too.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.